My name is Lindy Burnham, and I'm a marketing specialist with the Hudson Group of Lawrence, Massachusetts. Today I'm going to be explaining the difference between PA-DSS Acceptance and PCI Compliance. Before we begin, we need to define PCI. PCI stands for the Payment Card Industry, and you will oftentimes in the media and online see PCI and SSC listed together. SSC stands for the Security Standards Council. So PCI SSC is the Payment Card Industry Security Standards Council. Well, let's discuss who they are and what they do. This is an organization that is comprised of several member organizations, specifically credit card issuers that include American Express, Discover, JCB International, MasterCard, and Visa. These individual credit card issuers all have their own set of security standards. They realized that it was going to be a challenge for individual merchants or people who accept credit cards to adhere to six different sets of standards. Therefore, they got together and they formed the PCI SSC to come up with and administer a single set of security standards for merchants to adhere to. The PCI Security Standards Council is an open, global forum for the ongoing development, enhancement, storage, dissemination, and implementation of security standards for account data protection. What the PCI does is publish standards and grant certifications. What they don't do is themselves inspect, test, and review companies, systems, and software packages. You can find out more about this particular organization online at PCISecurityStandards.org. In the transportation business, PCI really administers two programs that pertain to us specifically. Let's look at these two programs today. First, we have PCI Compliance. These are a set of standards that adhere to or apply to merchants. These are Hudson clients, the people who are actually accepting credit cards from individual travelers. We then also have the PA-DSS Acceptance program, which specifically pertains to software vendors, such as the Hudson Group and other ground transportation industry software providers. We're going to start off by looking at the software provider program. This is referred to as PA-DSS. It stands for Payment Application Data Security Standard. This standard helps software vendors and others develop secure payment applications that do not store prohibited data. PA-DSS has 13 core requirements, and these are the requirements that Hudson and other software vendors must adhere to. Number one, we cannot retain full magnetic stripe card verification code or value. Sometimes this is referred to as the CVV number. It's the 3 or 4-digit security code that appears on the reverse side of most credit cards. Number two, we must protect stored cardholder data. Number three, provide secure authentication features when someone's logging into the application, for example. Number four, we must log payment application activity. Number five, we must develop secure payment applications. Number six, we must protect wireless transmissions of that data. 7, we must test payment applications to address vulnerabilities. 8, facilitate secure network implementation. 9, cardholder data must never be stored on a server that is connected to the internet. Number 10, facilitate secure remote access to payment applications. 11, encrypt sensitive traffic over public networks. 12, encrypt all non-console administrative access. And 13, maintain instructional documentation and training programs for customers, resellers, and integrators of our programs. PA-DSS Acceptance requires outside independent evaluation and verification that all core requirements listed on the previous slide have been addressed and are met. This is where the QSA enters. QSA is a qualified security assessor. QSAs are certified and authorized by the PCI Council to inspect, test, review, and evaluate companies and programs to ensure that the PCI standards are met. QSAs are recertified annually by the Security Standards Council, and they, the QSA, submit the final report after reviewing a software program with the results of their analysis to the PCI Standards Council. Hudson went out and found a QSA, again listed on the PCI Security Standards Council website, that is mainline, i.e., they've been seen, they are well known, well recognized. They were not necessarily the least expensive of the QSA options available to Hudson, but they did have a very high profile, high visibility, and a very good track record. What the QSA does. Hudson entered into a 3-year contract with TrustWave. This contract is likely to be renewable. Like doing your taxes, once you first start a tax return or filing your first tax return, this becomes a process that you do every year from then forward. The same is true with the PCI process. This is not a once and done type program. Once you actually begin the program, it is likely that you will be involved with the program indefinitely. The QSA evaluate, tests, and ethically hacks Hudson's software system. The QSA provides deficiency reports outlining standards that need to be adhered to and perhaps in the current version or revision of the software are not met. They also provide remediation recommendations, so they don't just tell you what's wrong, they also tell you specifically how to fix it. The QSA does follow-up review and testing after updates have been issued, and they, once finished with their evaluation of the program, submit a report on validation, or ROV, to the PCI Security Standards Council. As time passes, they also look at the Hudson software after it's been updated to review it and ensure that it still adheres to the PCI recommendations and requirements. The amazing thing is that after Hudson started this process, only a very few hours of development was needed to actually come up to and meet all of the standards. This is evidence that Hudson's core credit card processing system was already rock solid and far exceeded most minimum requirements. The only things that were necessary for Hudson to add to its system to actually meet and conform to the PA-DSS standards were some additional application login security enhancements. As an example, in the past, prior to the PA-DSS program, a user who was trying to log into the Hudson software would enter in a user ID and then a password. If the password was entered incorrectly, the system would prompt the user to add or enter the password again. If again the password was entered incorrectly, the system would allow the user to enter the password again, with no limitation on the number of attempts. Well, this is exactly what a hacker would have to do typically if trying to access the system. Trying to guess a password, they would keep entering the password until they eventually perhaps got in. One of the enhancements or improvements added to the Hudson system is the ability to lock a user out after a certain number of unsuccessful login attempts. Further, that user would be locked out for a configured period of time. The minimum period of time is 30 minutes, unless a supervisor enters the system and unlocks that user's account. All of this information is tracked and logged in the database and can be reported. There was additional system logging updates that were added as enhancements. Additional information was written to system logs. And these are the only two real significant items that required any additional development to meet the PA-DSS standards. December 19, 2012 was what I refer to as PA-DSS Day at Hudson. This is the date that Hudson was notified that its version 1.94 of the HGTS, or Hudson Ground Transportation System, was accepted as a PA-DSS validated payment application. The Hudson Group and the HGTS system is now listed on the PCI Security Standards Council website as a validated payment application and validated payment vendor. Well, here's the fine print. The HGTS version 1.94, specifically build 5147, was the version or the instance of software that was evaluated and approved. The Hudson deployment and development cycle is such that new software is updated and improved weekly. So the version that was accepted is now already old. Many enhancements have been added since December of 2012. None of them actually pertain to the way that credit cards are processed. So technically, if you're running a version that is newer than 1.94, build 5147, that version has not been PA-DSS evaluated. Further, Hudson had to start somewhere, and we decided that many of our users in their local office were accessing and running our system on Windows XP Service Pack 3 operating system computers or PCs in their office. So we had our software evaluated on this specific workstation. Obviously, people are going to be installing our software on newer pieces of hardware, running newer versions of Windows. This means that Hudson will need to continue in the future to have future releases and builds of its system deployed on other Windows operating systems, evaluated and reviewed for PA-DSS acceptance. So as mentioned in the previous slide, this is a process that will be ongoing and will probably really never end. Further, it is required in order to be PA-DSS accepted that all users use the software as outlined and defined in the Hudson PA-DSS Client Implementation Guide. This information may be downloaded from the Hudson Knowledge Base. It is basically a document created by the Hudson Group that shows users how the system must be configured and how it must be used in order to maintain the PA-DSS requirements. Obviously, Hudson is far from being done. We will now be submitting HGTS version 194 and future releases on other Windows operating system platforms to our QSA, TrustWave, for PA-DSS review. Once we have our local HGTS system reviewed and accepted, we will be proceeding to and having our web and mobile systems reviewed and evaluated for PA-DSS acceptance as well. Let's look now at the second program, which is PCI Compliance. Specifically, this applies to merchants, people who accept credit cards from travelers. This is and pertains to or applies to, includes most all Hudson clients. The PCI Compliance standards, as mentioned before, were developed by the PCI SSC, or Security Standards Council, and it's referred to as PCI DSS for Data Security Standard. If you are a merchant that accepts payment cards, you are required to be compliant with the PCI Data Security Standard. The standards apply to all organizations that store, process, or transmit cardholder data. There are 12 items that every merchant must address and adhere to in order to meet the PCI compliance requirements. Number 1, merchants must install and maintain a firewall configuration to protect cardholder data. 2, they may not use vendor-supplied defaults for system passwords and other security parameters. Number 3, they must protect stored cardholder data. 4, encrypt transmission of cardholder data across open public networks. 5, use and regularly update antivirus software or programs. 6, develop and maintain secure systems and applications. 7, restrict access to cardholder data by business need to know. 8, assign a unique ID to each person with computer access. 9, restrict physical access to cardholder data. And 10, track and monitor all access to network resources and cardholder data. 11, regularly test security systems and processes. And 12, maintain a policy that addresses information security for all personnel. When it comes to PCI compliance for merchants, you have a choice: the SAQ or perhaps the QSA. Let's look at the two options and which may be best for you. SAQ stands for Self-Assessment Questionnaire. If you are qualified, you can review your own organization and practices and answer a battery of questions on a form. When finished, you submit the answers along with an attestation of compliance. You can select your SAQ type according to the type of business you run and how you process credit cards. Most Hudson clients will likely need to complete what's known as SAQ Form D, mostly because other types require no cardholder data storage. This slide shows the different SAQ types and the requirements in order to meet that particular type and what type of form is appropriate then for your business model. As mentioned previously, SAQ-D is the one that will most likely apply to most Hudson clients. The form consists of 288 questions plus the attestation of compliance. The other alternative is the QSA, or Qualified Security Assessor. These are experts. They are knowledgeable, they are technical, and they can interpret the standards for you and complete and submit nearly all of your paperwork in much less time. They can perform required security scans and audits for you as well. If you opt not to hire a QSA, but to do the process yourself, it may require the dedication of IT or fairly technical staff within your organization for the duration of the project. If you do decide to hire or retain the services of an approved QSA, you need to make sure that the QSA is indeed currently certified to perform the service. You can go to the PCI Security Standards.org website, and there is a list there of approved and certified QSAs. The Hudson Group is not an approved QSA. This means that Hudson cannot assist you with your questionnaires. Once you do decide to start and go through the PCI compliance process, there are many benefits that come out as a result. You'll have improved business security practices and procedures in place. You will now have the convenience and security of knowing that there is no security vulnerability in your organization. You'll have reduced liability. You'll be able to eliminate any non-compliance fees and charges that are assessed to you monthly by your credit card processors. Also, you'll have the marketing advantage of being able to promote in your literature and to larger prospects as well as current corporate accounts that your data is, or their cardholder data is all PCI compliant and secure. If you actually look at the PCI compliance requirements, it can be a fairly lengthy process to go through. There is, however, an opportunity or an option on the horizon within Hudson that may render the PCI compliance process moot or even unnecessary. This new technology is called tokenization. The reason why it greatly simplifies the PCI compliance process for merchants is because credit card information is never seen or stored in your office or your database. Let's look at the example on this slide presented here. You see a credit card number or hypothetical credit card number entered in red. Imagine your agents or your reservation call center staff taking this number over the phone and manually keying it into the Hudson HGTS system. Before that number is ever written to or stored to the database, it is sent in real time out to your credit card processor. The processor takes and retains that number and returns back to you a token. This token is typically a fairly long string of random letters and numbers that in their database represent or correspond to the stored credit card number. This token would be stored in the Hudson system in a reservation or in a customer's profile. The profile would still, however, show some identifying feature of the original credit card number, for example, the last 4 digits, in this case 6789, so that you could actually ask or confirm with the client that this is the credit card they wish to use. But only those 4 digits would appear or ever be stored in the Hudson database. If you're never storing credit card information, therefore PCI compliance and all of the standards and requirements really no longer apply to you. There would still be the need to ensure that if your agents are working on laptops or in a wireless network or a wireless office, that this information could never be sniffed or intercepted on your wireless LAN. So there may still be some security requirements that would be necessary, but the majority of the PCI compliance requirements would already no longer apply. Hudson is currently beta testing this technology with a couple of existing clients and hopes to have it available during the 2013 year for general release. Not all processors support tokenization. So one of the restrictions or limitations to Hudson clients is they may need to consider modifying or changing to a different processor in order to obtain tokenization. But the savings in non-compliance fees and fines may be worth considering. Well, thank you for today's brief presentation regarding the difference between PA-DSS Acceptance and PCI Compliance. More information on these programs and many links and other documents are available in the Hudson Knowledge Base at hudsonltd.com/knowledge_base/category:security. Specific information regarding the PCI Security Standards Council may be found at www.PCISecurityStandards.org.